Can you give your thoughts on the current debt ceiling situation?
The debt ceiling situation. Yeah, yes. I've learned a lot about. We've had a lot of these debt ceiling situations over the years, and there's a tremendous amount. But there are some new things that have happened, and some new things that I've heard about just recently in this one. First of all, interestingly enough, they have a thing called a discharge
Petition.
discharge petition, where actually in the negotiations that were going around in the GOP party to get McCarthy placed into the speakership role, it was basically requested that they be able to put a bill onto the floor without his approval.
Mm-hmm.
And they need majority to sign on to that to put it on the floor. Well, the Democrats turned around and decided to use that, and they put a bill into committee. The bill has to be into committee for 30 days. It's
Yep.
already happened. And they're going to then introduce that and amend that to be a debt ceiling increase. And they literally put a piece of paper out on the secretary's desk. 218 House representatives have to go and sign that.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you assume that every Democrat would sign it, then you need 5 more Republicans to sign it. Now, there were 4 Republicans who did not vote for the GOP bill. Again, I think by estimation, there's like 25 to 28 Republicans that are in pretty heavily blue areas, purple areas that Biden won.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're concerned about, these types of things. And I suspect that in the end, they'll find 5 to do that. Unfortunately, I suspect that won't happen until there's more chaos that happens to kind of drive that need forward. But once they get those signatures, then they can put this bill on the floor. Theoretically, they've already got enough signatures to get it on the floor, which
Yep.
is a majority, and then they could vote for it. I wouldn't be surprised if that does happen, if it's not more like 20 Republicans that step across instead of 5, just because it'll mitigate the kind of the blame across the board.
Backlash.
Yeah, maybe it's better to come across as a bit of a block. I do think they'd be able to go back to their blue areas or what have you and say, hey, we stepped across and, for the betterment of the country or
Yeah.
what have you. Right? There's some political reasons. They're up for election every 2 years. So it's a much different scenario than it is for the senators every 6 years. So that's interesting. The White House is also apparently contemplating declaring the debt ceiling unconstitutional.
Yeah, using the 14th Amendment.
Yeah, and so that's not been, I haven't seen much on that before. I think that's kind of interesting. The 14th Amendment basically, and I'm paraphrasing dramatically, basically says that Congress doesn't have the authority to authorize the money that's being spent. So, there's a whole bunch of other kind of gimmicky things that have been talked about, like printing a $1 trillion coin, all of these things. So I suspect that we don't default, but I also suspect that we get close enough to create some havoc in the market. It would be really nice to see that not happen, and it just gets passed and people, if I'm in the House, honestly, there's other things you got to be working on besides this,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you're not going to get what you want, in my opinion, out of this, and so why not just, make some noise and then move on and work on something you might be able to get done. But I don't know if that's the environment that we're in right now.
Yeah, because was 2011 with the Tea Party that kind of did a very similar kind of hold the government hostage in a sense.
Yeah. So market dropped 17%. That was the worst one. Last time it happened, it was down 5%. But this is more like the Tea Party arena than the last one. But and in 2011, actually, the U.S. debt got downgraded.
Yeah.
And so the U.S. had to pay more for interest on their bonds that they have to issue because we're running a deficit. Ended up costing $18 billion was what I read in extra interest cost because of that. So these are all things that end up happening if we get too far down the road. So I hope we do. And Janet Yellen's comment about June 1st. I don't know if that's true per se. I'll assume it is, or if it's just a tactic to try to get Congress to move faster. Because if it's August 31st, Not a bad idea to tell them it's June 1st.
They're not going to move until they actually have to.
Yeah, so let's move the deadline up a little bit in front of Armageddon. I don't see that as a bad strategy. I wouldn't blame her or the Treasury for doing that, but it's hard to tell what's going to happen, and they probably don't know for sure because it does have to do with revenues and expenses, and the revenues are sometimes really inconsistent because it's tax revenues coming in. Yeah. So, but very, very good question. Very topical right now.